Welcome back to another Nostr News.
It's good to be back in person.
Max, is good to see you.
It's good to see you, DK.
I think it was our last one was remote, right? Because we were on the road.
Yeah.
And we were off for a few weeks, so
That's
kind
right.
of we're back here in San Francisco, and good news is we're around all of May.
That's right. Well,
At least we are.
I'm actually going to be leaving, sadly, the week after next because I'm going to the Bitcoin conference for 2 days, and then there's something happening in New York right after. So we'll have to figure it out from there.
So
but
when
for
do
at
you
least,
come back?
I'm back late May.
Oh boy.
I know, and then you're going to be gone for a little while.
Yeah. Because then we're gone like late May through kind of mid to late June.
Oh, damn.
So we're going to be just touch and go.
Touch and go. Hey, but whenever we're here, it's amazing.
Yeah.
And then at least by midsummer, I'm planning to be here through whenever. So
Yeah, great. And then I think summer we're probably going to be out and about, as we are on the mountains. So,
right.
But we can do remote shows like we did, and we can dial
do
that
remote
in.
ones, and as we're here, we'll do it here, and then at some point we'll be back in SF together at the same time. Hey, but we're here now, right?
Yeah, totally. And I find it so fun, and it just feels so different to like be sitting here across the table.
So much more fun.
It's so fun. And I had Danny in here, who you introduced me to.
I listened to that podcast today. It was fantastic.
It was so good. He was right in that hot seat.
Yeah, I know. I feel like, oh shit, I gotta live up to something now.
Right. And who else is in town? We got somebody else in town who's going to be coming by. I'm trying to think of. It's like San Francisco isn't the center of this stuff, but there's enough people around that you stumble into them.
And I think, my hope is that San Francisco is going to become more of a Bitcoin hub than it's traditionally been.
Yeah.
I think that it certainly was like the quote unquote crypto hub. Not the only one, not like other technology waves, but there's a lot more of those people come into Bitcoin and get excited about Nostr. And I think Nostr is what's going to get a lot of them.
Yeah.
I expect to see a lot more happening in the Bay Area. So, and look, I mean, even like a year ago, I think I had no companies in the Bay Area.
Yeah.
Now I've got Danny and a couple other people here. So it's building.
Right. And what's I've actually never been to the Bitcoin conference. You're going, you said is it Miami?
Yeah, it's in Miami. I've gone to the last two. I have mixed feelings on it. I mean, on the one hand, it's awesome because just like everybody is there, right? And so I'm supposed to be judging a track, and I actually asked to be on the Nostr track, whatever they're calling that.
Yeah.
So that's exciting. It is a little overwhelming though. It's just like, I think I'm going to do it, maybe only like 2 days, like a little bit more low key. There's a couple of meetings I want to take, but there, the last couple of years, it was just like a lot. It was like parties every night and just nonstop. And, I mean, hats off to the BTC media guys. It's quite a production. I know that's like super hard to pull off. It's like, the Woodstock, everything is there. Right. So it's definitely not chill like Nostr.
Okay. And I'm going to miss the karaoke. So I hope you'll represent us at karaoke.
There's karaoke?
There's Nostrich karaoke.
What? I missed this.
I thought I saw like an Eventbrite or something where a bunch of Nostr people. I thought I saw a bunch of people tweeting or writing notes about it. Will, I think at one point had tried to round people up, and
for real?
Yeah,
I'll have to look this up. Well, then in that case, DK, you may have to make a last minute decision.
That's why I'm so crushed. I'm like, oh, karaoke's my favorite.
Come down for one day. It could be an interesting trip.
Right. I guess I got to figure out the timing because we've got some of the the shows we run in San Francisco. So.
Oh, gotcha. Well, anyways, now that you say karaoke, I'm more intrigued.
Yeah, Nostrich karaoke.
Yeah,
Nostr get the people.
Yeah.
So
it's provocative. Gets the people going.
That's right. So what else? So your like day job, right? Is Lightning Nostr investor.
Yeah.
What's
day job?
What is that? What does it look like these days? Is there a lot of activity? Are things kind of chilled out? 'Cause I know a lot of traditional, I call it like normie tech venture, is pretty slow these days.
Yeah, there's not a lot happening. So for context, I mean, I started my fund in late 2021, right? So it's about 18 months now, and I'm mostly deployed out of Fund 1. Kind of had to fit in a few of these Nostr deals, which I've been really excited about. So I've continued to be active, but, have done almost exclusively Nostr in the last 2 months, and I expect to see that happen. There's one deal I might do very soon that's like also more Bitcoin. It's not exactly Lightning, but it's kind of related to Lightning. It's kind of cool. But
can you talk about any of the stuff that you've done, or you want to keep it off the record for now?
Well, this one I definitely want to keep off the record because it's like a live deal, and there's like some, it's getting finalized. But some of the other ones, I don't know who's public and who's not yet.
Okay.
Maybe we should check with
Better,
everybody
yeah.
first.
We'll check in with people. Yeah.
But I'm really excited to talk about this. Like because we've co-invested in a lot of these, but the Nostr deals that I've done, I'm so stoked on. And like, it's funny because on the way over here, I was trying to do a little bit of my homework. I already listened to your jam with both Pablo and Danny. So I want to talk about those.
Yeah.
But I also listened to G Sovereignty's jam with Pablo, maybe the first 20 or 30 minutes. Fantastic. Yeah. I'm going to start using that to like Nostrich pill a lot of people because like their excitement is just so palpable. I mean, you're listening to these guys and it sounds like they're like drug addicts. Like, man, I can't, if I'm not coding on Nostr, I start to twitch, I'm like, I'm excited about that, but like, make sure you guys are like going outside or whatever.
Are you like that too? You're like, if I'm not wiring money, I start to twitch?
Definitely not. Like I look, at the end of the day, I think VC is very fun. It's very interesting. Yeah, I have a lot of interest in life and like, but these guys, like they're the hardcore builders. And I love that. I mean, I love that these are the kinds of people that we're working with. Yeah. And I forgot where I was going with that.
Well, when you're talking to teams, are there any sort of characteristics that you would, kind of observe about what makes a good team in the Nostr world?
And sorry, so go into that and then your original question with what's going on in sort of the venture landscape. So in terms of teams I like to fund, right? Like I think it's not like it's super different with Nostr. It's a little different because it's a bit earlier than Lightning and Bitcoin is, but it's growing faster. And so, for me, any team that I look at, right? Like I talked about this in this panel in Nostr. I like to look for people that I think are really smart and have sort of novel insights about the world. Mm-hmm. I like to look for people that I think have really great taste and sort of, the kinds of problems they're working on, visual taste or the kinds of solutions they come up with that are creative but also user friendly, right. And then also that just ship super fast because I think the reality is at the stage that I'm betting and you're betting, especially in Nostr. And when I got started with Lightning, when I first started getting really into Lightning, there were like almost no companies, almost no VCs doing this. There was one or two, and at this stage it's so early, like you don't know what's gonna stick. Right. You just can't, right? And so you can have theses, you can have ideas, but so. One common denominator across all the people I've been backing is that I think they have extremely novel insights about the world. Mm-hmm. I think they have great taste. Some in different dimensions, not everyone aesthetically, but in different ways. Yeah. And most importantly, they all ship fast, all of them. Yep. And anyway, so I think that's a great example. Pablo is one of the fastest shippers of all time. Mm-hmm. And that's something I'm looking for. In terms of the broader venture and Bitcoin Lightning landscape, I mean, stuff is still getting done for sure. It's definitely slowed down from what it was maybe 6 months ago. Mm-hmm. And I think, maybe valuations have come down a little bit, but at the end of the day, our valuations were never crazy in the first place, right? Mm-hmm. Like, you see in like quote unquote crypto land, some of these projects raising $50 million with nothing, $50 million valuation. Like that never happened at Bitcoin in the first place. So that's good. But, to be honest, man, like I feel like in my fund one, I made a lot of Lightning and Bitcoin infrastructure bets, some apps. Mm-hmm. And I think that I'm starting to see some of that fruit bearing right now. We'll talk later, but like, a couple of those bets have come out and raised Series A's. As an example, Fedi announced one today. I've got a couple others that were like really pushing to get them. They were pre-seed now to seed or seed now to Series A. Right. And those things are moving. So that's good. So I think you're going to start to see like a lot of the like really early bets I placed, pre-seed bets and from fund one are starting to like mature a little bit. You're starting to see, some of the earliest companies have all, come out raising Bs, not necessarily ones that I invested in, but you had Lightning Labs and then you had Zibity and then David Marcus's company, which we did invest in. That's, a huge mega round. So you're starting to see more growth rounds happening. And I think it's just going to be like over the next year, a lot of maturation and you're going to like see the network effect start spinning for Lightning. Now, at the same time, for my next fund, honestly, I'm most excited about Nostr because I think Nostr, as we talked about, brings Lightning and Bitcoin with it. Right. And if you look at the growth rates, I don't know if we have the stars pulled up here anywhere. Oh yeah. But Andre from Zibity, he kind of inspired me with this in one of his pieces. But he shows the GitHub stars for Nostr versus some like other, other things. So then if you go align timeline. All right. I mean, I think this is super important. And it's just, you see Nostr is just going vertical in a way that Bitcoin took a lot longer to do.
Yep.
And if you do, you don't have to do this right now, but if you also look at like, LND, which is the most popular implementation of the Lightning Network, it's already overpassed it in stars already.
Right.
And so that's in 3 months because, 3.5 months ago, there was basically nobody using it. And so anyway, I just think that, for me, that's where I'm focused now, and for fun too. I'm looking at a lot of stuff. I'm very interested in AI and the overlap with Lightning and Bitcoin, but I just think that Nostr is just going to drag Bitcoin with it.
Right. Yeah, I think somebody was talking about that. Do you know that guy? I think we're talking about DevNull, right?
Yeah.
He got into Nostr, I think he said 3 months ago, and then he kind of discovered Lightning and Bitcoin sort of as a side effect of getting Nostr. Now he's like, oh my God, now I'm going to run my own full node and my own Lightning node, and kind of, once you sort of get a taste of freedom and what these technologies are like and how open they are, then you're like, okay, show me everything else on the menu, right?
Totally. Anyways, I know that was going off on a lot of tangents. I want to hear what the hell's been going on with you, DK. I know you've been out and about the last couple months. You've been making some incredible videos.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, well, we went on a little bit of a road trip. So we were, kind of around California and kind of spending some time in the mountains, getting some last skiing in.
Which is crazy because it's like pretty late.
They're gonna have skiing, they claim, until the end of end of August.
It's wild.
Yeah, it's going to be, we've had, I think, 60 feet of snow up there in the mountains. So
Damn.
It's, so I've been, reading more, learning more, and kind of I'm kind of curious to make videos about things I hear people asking questions about on Nostr that I don't think we have good answers for, or at least it's not obvious to a newcomer what that's like. Because I feel like, there's so much inside Nostr. Everybody's like kind of, there's a lot of people who are really hardcore active, get it every day, but they have so much depth on what the technology is and how it works and how to do all these things. And I feel like there's, I'd like it to be more accessible and easy for like a newcomer to see and play with and try things without necessarily needing, I think nobody should ever have to understand what a NIP is. Like it should never show up in the UI.
I hope most people know what a NIP is. But.
Like my crusade, but I see all these like UIs where it's like, oh, you can't do that. You don't have NIP 07 installed, and I'm like, oh no.
Good luck with that.
And I think Carnage would back me up on this. He was complaining about similar things.
Yeah, no. I mean, if we ever like end up using the word NIPs in the Nostr context in like 2 years, something went real wrong.
Yeah. So I think we got to figure out how to both explain the how these tools work and why they're interesting, and just simplify them. And it's such a different kind of foundation, right?
Yeah.
Like, so I made one actually the other day about this NIP 07 LB thing. Like you show up on abla.news and, in like very reasonably, you're like, okay, I think he added a login now. But like you go show up on highlighter.com and there's no login, there's no create, there's no start. It's like, if you're new, how do you get started with this thing? It's like, well, you have to know. Well, that's you have to know that you have to be on this other service where you generate the thing, and then you have to have this other service that helps. Too many pieces. Just like give me the thing, right? So I'm almost like on a crusade to help simplify the communication of what these things are and how they work, and make them all like integrated in a way that helps simplify a user experience. And I think actually we were trading notes about this. I think Pablo mentioned on Nostr about wanting to have something of a micro app for onboarding or login.
Yeah.
And what was the one? Didn't we look at one a while back? Was it, I keep thinking the word Nostra. Was that?
It was part of the Bolt.fun hackathon.
Yeah.
And it was like a very simple onboarding app, but I for some reason couldn't get past the third frame. So it was very nicely done. Maybe I was doing something wrong, but it was like upload your profile picture and stuff like that.
Yeah. But I'm like, how do we make everything simpler? Not to reduce user choice.
Yeah.
If anybody wants, can flip in whatever they want, but there should be like some happy path.
So let's talk about this. I think it's a fantastic point. I agree with you 100%. Get rid of the NIPs, get rid of the technical jargon. I think there's a couple of points where it could make sense. Maybe it's a specific micro app. Maybe it's, someone like Albie that's focused on, login can do this. And I hope you guys get to do a jam soon to talk about that. But like, I've noticed also, the last couple of days I've been talking with, some fellow investors, and some of whom are my LPs that, they're like, okay, like we hear you talking about Nostr, like sounds cool. We try and play with it. Like, where do we even begin? There's just like all these issues of how do you create a quote unquote account?
Right.
Who do I follow? There's just so much there. So I've been sending them yesterday. I kind of created a giant list of resources, which is like my current, like, okay, here's from like noob to hero as quickly as possible.
Yeah. The Nostr starter pack.
The Nostr, well, funny enough, your Nostr starter pack is still on that list. Just
cool.
follow the people DK says. That's like, that's a great first step. So a couple of things. I also send some of our Nostr news episodes, a lot of your videos, some essays, like if you want to get them more theoretical. But I think like just like super hands-on. And one of the easiest things right now is for me to start them with Primal. Because I just say, go to primal.net, forget login. Just like they have an opinionated view that you start with. Amazing. People want an opinionated view because otherwise you're sitting there and it's just like ghost town. Like, what's going on? And then they love, and really well done here, Milian. They love the ability to just like go to view and go and see what Jack Dorsey sees or Edward Snowden. They're like, whoa. That's like a magic moment. So anyway, so that's a great way to get started. Then I tell them, go to Nostr.band, search for people you might know, look at some of their trending posts, some of their trending lists. That's an interesting way for them to get started. What would your ideal micro app look like to get onboarded? And B, when you talk to other friends in Silicon Valley or whatever that like are technically, capable enough, but they're not going to put more than like 5 minutes into this. What do you tell them to do?
Well, it's a tough one right now because I end up having to sit down and have a longer conversation about why I find it interesting, despite the fact that it's also a bit of a mess. I mean, it's a beautiful mess, but it's a mess. Honestly, it's a mess. Yeah. And so I think, I think like Primal is great for seeing kind of bird's eye view of the network or see how does Jack Dorsey or Edward Snowden look at it. But like when you come to a new social tool, you're not typically trying to first see how other people see it. You just kind of want to like get involved somehow. Yeah. And the Primal website right now doesn't have a start, create, login, sign up button. Right. It kind of has like, if you have Albi installed, it'll pop that for you. But if you don't, like, I don't know, what do you do, right?
I heard you love pop-ups.
and yeah, we talked to Milian offline, and I think they'll have solutions to that stuff soon. But I think that's a great example of like an app that's willing to take the discovery, the somewhat, discovery centralizing potential, things that might be ideological risks, but in favor of UX, which I actually don't think the ideological risks are real. I think they're sort of overstated because everything's still portable and you can leave.
Yeah, you can always leave, yeah.
But I like the fact that they're showing what that looks like, but I think they need some sort of a way to simplify the actual account creation because most people want to show up and make an account and follow people. Yes. And so then, to make an account very easily, I'd say download Damus, which I think is like super well built. Like I love Damus and I use it daily driver. But it's like opinionated to say like keep everything decentralized so far, right? Mm-hmm. And so we don't have, like, if you do sign up with Damus and you create an account very easily, there's not a good way to, like, just follow a bunch of people that you might like, or just start discovering reasonable sets of people to potentially connect with or reply to or make your first post or whatever, So I think it's something like the simplicity of onboarding, download an iOS app like Damus, and set up an account, click through, don't even think too much about it, and it just kind of works. But then I think some sort of discovery service, even if it's switchable, even if it's not like your discovery service, but a discovery service, to help you get connected to the network, connected to the active people on it. Yeah. And then you can kind of like, once you get flowing a little bit, then you can explore. And I think like looking at the very abstract notion of like, how do other people look at the network? What are the stats in the network? Those to me feel like advanced experiences once you get it. But I think most people want, like, think about when you sign up for, Twitter or Snapchat or Facebook or whenever you sign up for a social network, you kind of want to get involved. And then maybe you'll learn about the more advanced features later. Yeah. And I don't think we have that unified kind of starting point to get involved.
I agree with that. And to be clear, I mean, I think what the Primal view and the Nostr.band view do really well for me is just show people, look, it's real. I'm not just making this up. Like it is happening. It's awesome. Like kind of like, here's a taste of what this could be if you're willing to invest the time to get there, which eventually that time should be like as little as possible, but like it's been useful. So I have a lot of questions and thoughts about this. Do you know, it's been so long since I've set up Damus. Do they prompt that you follow anyone when you get started or nothing right now?
So I've gone through onboarding several times after I created my kind of daily driver account. And it wasn't that way for a long time. I would guess it's still not that way, but I don't know for sure. But I think it's like, to do that, you need some opinion, right? You need to decide somehow.
Well, okay, so I could see kind of two ways of going with this. And one way is to follow suggested people, and that could be super opinionated, and it could just be one person's view, just kind of like you did with your Nostr starter pack. Just like, it's centralized, it's my view, like whatever. This is what I think. Get started here at 20 people. It could be people, and maybe it's algorithmically chosen. Ideally, the algorithm is more open source, and you can kind of see those people are trending for a reason. And this, I think you've suggested this to him as well. And if you're listening, Arthur, this could be a really interesting idea to kind of offer, different discovery services as an API.
Yeah.
So, you could just say like, hey, Arthur's put a lot of work in on his back end to figure out, what he calls trust rank,
right.
which is a very fascinating signal of like who's zapping who and stuff that I'm just like super fascinated by. And, it's all potentially something that you could have different kind of like starter pack APIs or whatever.
Right.
That like, I want to follow the top, you could offer this to Damas or whoever, the top 20, trending people according to his trust rank algorithm, and it changes day by day.
Yep.
Cool. So that's one way you could do it. The other way you could do it, and I'm not sure what people would prefer, and maybe different people have different preferences, but is one of the ideas that Carnage put out. We'll probably talk more about his UI post, which I thought was great, which was hashtags. Mm-hmm. Like maybe you don't care as much about people, but you care about specific topics.
Yep.
So as an example, and I liked he even went as specific to say, imagine you're in Damas and you type the letter P, it pops up, okay, I'm interested in whatever things that you're interested in.
Porn.
Yeah, I don't know why I chose that. It's like, it's probably going to be very popular there, for example. And ideally not just Bitcoin stuff.
Right, yeah.
Right. And so I think that that's a really simple idea, but maybe if there's an easy way, not just to follow people, but it's just like kind of, I remember like back in the day, like Quora and some of these sites used to prompt you, like pick like 5 things you're interested in. And that was always a way they got you started.
Right.
I think that could work too.
But those are, so the way Quora would have you choose those topics is like they're choosing what topics to potentially surface.
Yeah.
And I think that's like kind of that ideological line that people are cautious of, and I think with good reason. Like probably Damas doesn't want to say, here's the 5 accounts you should follow, or here's the 5 topics you should consider following, because then they're sort of imbuing too much taste, too much of their own preference, and like you just sort of can imagine how that thing becomes an ML feedback loop that then just spirals out of control.
That's fair.
But I don't think it's actually a risk in practice if they're switchable. Mm-hmm. So maybe V1 you just choose, hey, here's a dozen people that are actually really active and are showing up every day creating things and are good. So like follow them. You'll get a sense of what this network platform protocol is all about. But eventually, just like we can configure, do you want to post your media to nostr.build or do you want to post it somewhere else? We could say like, do you want to use the default Damas discovery services, or do you want to use, Arthur's, nostr.band, or do you want to use Million's primal.net, or like some other roll your own discovery service,
whatever
right?
you want. Yeah.
And I think that's almost like I was kind of calling it jokingly the app store for discovery services.
Yeah.
Right. Which I think is like kind of the right answer for this. Like, don't let one of them spin out of control. User choice is kind of what keeps everybody in service of the user's needs instead of in service of the kind of like corporate overlord ML algorithm that spirals out of control.
I agree with you on all of that. And I think that it's always important that you have the right to like sub your own pieces and algorithms in there.
Yeah.
However, on the other side, I truly believe, and you want to be careful with these things because decisions you make out of quote unquote convenience early on can lead to very unintended consequences. But like, I just think, all that's well and good, but like, imagine you're just some completely random person and you get on there and it's like, I don't know what to follow. And to be fair, like we don't even know like what topics have some critical mass and density right now. Yeah. So I almost feel like there has to be some just like, different clients or different relays just take a point of view and they're like, we get it. It's centralized.
Yeah.
But at least for now, and you can always sub it out later.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But at least for now, here are 10 themes that we've gone and, figured out there's enough critical mass. There's at least 100 or 1,000 high quality accounts writing something about that.
Right.
So that you go there and you're like, okay, this is something I'm at least somewhat interested in. I see it's it's alive.
Right.
You know?
Yep. Totally. I think that's the way, and I think we'll get there. I mean, super deep respect to everybody who's building on this because it's early.
It's super hard too.
It's not like these are all easily solvable problems, and all you need to do is raise the PR and.
Of course.
But I think that like in my opinion that's kind of what's missing from helping more people come on and have a good experience. And you can squint and see it. Like Damus has really good simple account creation. Primal has really good discovery services. Artur's got really good suggestions, but it's not all kind of
in one place.
Either in one place or even like orchestrated in a way that you can just download a thing, tap, and get going.
Yeah.
And then once you're like, oh, actually, I want to switch it up, and more the configuration after the fact. Right now, we're keeping it very clean, or everybody building something is keeping it sort of fairly clean from an ideology perspective, but a little bit. You have to really kind of get what's going on to get engaged.
Well, and I think something else that's really helpful here is just the more empathy you can have for a noob, the better. Yeah. And it's like one challenge is for all of us. And I think of myself, this included, I kind of got re-empathized yesterday. Yeah. And, because, so I was talking to a couple of different LPs who are really good investors, right? And I've been telling them about this Nostr stuff, and they're like, we see it a little bit, we buy it, but like they want to get it.
Yeah.
But like these people are smart too, and like they don't have all the time in the world, but like it just really gave me this kind of like empathy shot to see like someone that agrees with what I'm saying in theory, is fascinated by the stats, really wants it to work, and it's still a challenge to onboard, right? And so I think for the developers out there, just remembering that, it's wonderful to build for a core audience right now, and like we're the lifeblood, the early adopters that keep it going. But as we go from, whatever it is, 500K to 5 million users, just finding some way of just like having a friend on board in front of you that's never used Nostr before, has no idea what this is. Like, it's important to have that empathy, I think. Yeah. And I think even lost it in the last 2 months because I'm so deep in this with you talking about it. We were talking about the nips and this, and then it was just like, just like a reality check to be like, oh wait, this really smart, motivated person's like, what now?
Right. Did you, speaking of this, have you bumped into Cassie, or Cassie's arrival on Nostr?
I heard a little bit about her. I saw it on one of the Nostr reports, which shout out to those guys. They do a great job.
Yeah, they do a great job. I think she came on about a week ago, and I think maybe Pablo, I don't know if he found her in the universal feed or whatever.
Pablo Surface Cassie?
What
is that guy not doing in Nostr?
That's where I think I first bumped into her, which was like maybe her first day or two. And he's just kind of like, hey, welcome, and hope things are good. And, I think people started zapping her. And so she was like, what's this? And so it was kind of cool to see somebody who was, not necessarily coming. I'm actually curious why she showed up in the first place. Like what sort of drew her to it. And
should ask her.
Well, I invited her to chat about it, but I think she's a little overwhelmed with,
fair enough.
Appearances and stuff.
She's a celebrity now.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm kind of curious, like what drew her to Nostr, and then people started sending her Bitcoin. And she's like, "What? This is crazy! How So I love seeing it through fresh eyes like that, and hearing how how she gets connected to people, and what she was hoping to find, and what she felt like she actually found. I kind of want to help get some of those stories out there, because I think hearing somebody who's not so, presumably maybe not super ideologically aligned, but just kind of like curious about this cool new technology and wants to hear all kinds of parts of the story. And it's, they don't feel like they weren't censored on Twitter, but they just want to like play with some new tools,
Well, I am convinced that there's at least 2 magic moments, and maybe there's more, but these are the 2 that really got me early on. And whenever I can show this to someone, a user, they get it, right? One of those magic moments is related to Bitcoins getting zapped or sending a zap.
Yep.
When I'm like, you just sent real Bitcoin, received real time.
Yep.
And it was basically free.
Yep.
That's mind blowing.
Yep.
Like everyone I show that to is just like, wait, I thought Lightning was dead or Bitcoin's dead or like whatever. It's like, no, it works better than all the other crap out there, including fiat and crypto rails. Yep. It's the only one that works.
Right.
So that's like that. And that's why I'm so convinced, by the way, that Nostr is going to bring Bitcoin Lightning mainstream, because it's like, when you see that experience, everyone's eyes light up and they're like, oh shit, I need to go learn about Lightning.
Yeah.
The second magic experience is being able to port your identity from one app to the other. Now, in the early days, when I first used to show people, it would be like, I created my key on Damus. Now I put it in Albi and can log on to Snort. Whoa. Even bigger sort of mindfuck is I created an account with Albi or Damas to look at Twitter. Now I'm going to go log into Zapster, which is a music site,
Right.
or Abla.news,
Right.
which is a long form site, or some of these new NOS wallet marketplaces, which is a marketplace. And then that's when people start going, oh my God, this is so much bigger. Like this is much bigger than Twitter and social media. We're rebuilding the net.
Right.
So one question I have, and this is, and maybe you have more thoughts on this. And again, I would love to hopefully see you do the jam with Albie. Maybe they're in a great position to do that because they are that sort of, most used login for different web apps. How can you help people not only discover the Twitter use case, whatever, that's cool, but like have that magic moment of, oh my God, I just had my identity and social graph ported from Twitter to Medium to Spotify.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. And I tried, I don't know if you saw the Taibbi video that I made.
Yeah, it was great.
But I tried to show that, I guess maybe it should stand on its own, but I tried to show that kind of idea that you could take that identity and you can play with, I think I showed 4 or 5 different clients. I agree. Those are, I think, the 2 magic moments is, getting zapped and seeing this is real internet, kind of magic internet money flying around, but real value being transferred basically for free in very tiny amounts. And then kind of the being able to log in anywhere. I do worry though that some people, like I would say like somebody who's not really into it yet, still sees it as like some sort of a Twitter clone. And so I think there's, Pablo keeps referencing, I think maybe Jack said something about it's not, instead of running from, we should be running to.
Yeah.
And I think we don't yet know exactly what we're running to. So we're doing
that's
a lot
the
of
fun of
running
it.
from. Yeah. That's what's fun. But then I think once we have an experience like that, and I think like what Pablo's doing with Highlighter could be one of those running to experiences.
Agreed.
But I think, there's obviously infinite developer creativity and open source contributions that can help discover that. But you want to set up a little bit because you had some ideas on kind of the Highlighter stuff, or you had some.
I do. In fact, I would love to give a little bit of feedback and have a discussion around both your conversation with Pablo and Danny, because I thought both of those guys are working on running 2 experiences. So let's start with Pablo. First of all, again, that dude has more experiments in the last week than I've had in like the last 33 years. So props to him. On the highlighter.com, I think there's a lot of different ways this can go. And for those of you who haven't played with it yet, one of the fundamental concepts is he proposed a NIP that makes highlighting a piece of text its own Nostr event. And that's a very interesting primitive because now you can have a piece of text, multiple different people highlighting that text. You can see if multiple people highlighted the same piece of text. Because it's an event, you can also zap the highlight itself, which then has interesting implications for the future of both creation and curation and distribution, i.e., I write a document, you help it get discovered because you have an audience by highlighting it. Anyone that zaps the thing that I wrote or the piece that you highlighted, you can split the payments. There's just all these really interesting primitives and stuff around it. Cool. I have to say, so I was playing with it last night, and there's so much cool stuff there, but it took me a while to figure out exactly how to get started. Eventually, I was able to upload, what I thought was kind of a really cool article from just like a random blog on energy, one of my favorite posts on energy that really explains how the cost of energy is coming down over time. And it was great, and I got it, but there was like, how do I now get this to other people? And what's the shared experience? What are other people highlighting? I don't know. And so, and again, this is not to criticize at all. Like this is such an early concept. We're all playing around together.
Yeah.
But the thing that really resonated for me from y'all's conversation was this idea of how badass would it be if I come online, highlighter.com, and we're starting small. This can expand out, but every day or every week even, there's one document. And it's a document that we know at least the core community of Nostrages is going to be interested. So it's either a Nostr seminal text probably, or maybe a Bitcoin Lightning seminal text. Maybe, there's a new one every day or every week as we start to get more critical mass. And what I would love to see there is, okay, here's the GG paper. Fantastic. Great paper. What did DK think was interesting? What were his annotations?
Right.
What did Pablo think was interesting? What were his annotations? Like literally there's like 10 people I can think of that I think are extremely smart and whose opinion I'm like always interested in. You're one, GG's one, Pablo's one. Artur, Million. There's a lot of these people, the Albie guys. So let's say there's 10 to 20 people I can think of off the top of my head. I want to know exactly what their comments and highlights are for this document. I want to know also for any other document they do. And so the thing that I can't get out of my head, I shared this with Pablo at one time, and I want to talk more about them as well, is I liked a lot back in the day Rap Genius.
Yeah.
We talked about this.
Yeah.
And Andreessen, for all their whatever now with crypto, like back in the day, Mark Andreessen, he, created Mosaic. He had this whole thesis around creating an annotation layer for the web. That's why they invested in Rap Genius. And then you had some great insights. Maybe you'll share about why they didn't go out there. But what I loved about that site was like, okay, here's a rap song I love. I'm curious, like, what are people explaining about? Like, what is this metaphor I didn't understand? And it was like a badass site.
Yep.
And I think now we have the right substrate to build that for way more than just music. So that's my personal request. Is I would just find it so badass to go to highlighter.com and see a seminal text that I already respect. Let's start with the Gigi one. Fantastic.
Yep.
Any of Gigi's articles. That guy is great.
Yep.
And I want to see what you and Pablo and Artur and Million and a few other people have highlighted. That's it.
Yeah, I agree. I would love that product. We sort of worked on flavors of that for years.
Yeah, that's your
before,
thing.
And that's what I would like is, and I think we never quite did what you're saying, and I wish we did, and I think hopefully Pablo is excited about it to do. But I think find a set of people that all care about each other's opinions, because that's where we're gathering to talk about it. I think Rap Genius was like a glimmer of hope toward this, but ultimately you go to Rap Genius because you did a Google search and you end up on a lyric site through SEO. You're not like going to Rap Genius because you know that Max, like I don't go there because I know Max is there and I know Max has a lot of history in his mind about, rap lyrics. So it's less about the people that you're coming to interact with there, and it's more about the utility of like, what did Biggie mean when he said, and
something illegal.
Yeah, okay. Redacted. But I think the whole mechanism of that was never able to grow outside of the kind of lyric site SEO thing, and it was very utilitarian about what were more depth of knowledge. I think what we have here is a little bit more like an academic paper network, or like,
maybe not academic papers. That's like so dense. Like I like just these like good idea like blog posts or something.
But I guess I just meant that they're like, when you publish an academic paper, there's a community of other academics who care about the same thing that you care about. And you're like, oh, the professor at MIT said this, but the professor at this place, they're like, the people really matter. You're like, oh, well, he's legit because he's legit. He did the transformer paper and now he's writing this about that. And like the person really matters. And like, that's what these identities, these are social identities. It's not just what did anybody have to say about Gigi's paper. I care, like, what did Max have to say about paragraph 3 of Gigi's paper?
Totally.
Right? Because I know your thought process.
And this is, by the way, this is actually getting even more exciting because, this potentially is a much better, like, peer review process for just, like, knowledge formation in general or, like, the scientific process. That's extremely exciting.
Totally.
But also, this kind of dovetails nicely with some of the things that Artur has been exploring around trust rank, right? Which is, and this is kind of another entry point to explore similar ideas,
right?
Which is you build up credibility over time based on the feedback, annotations, highlights that you give and the responses that people gave to your responses.
Yep.
Whether that's zaps or whatever. Then that starts to form an interesting basis, like you've said many times in the early days of PageRank, anything that ranks back to Stanford, probably legit. And, to a degree. And
anything at Stanford linked out.
From
Stanford out was higher PageRank.
Yeah. And, we've kind of had this concept, and I think to some degree Artur has just kind of had to pick, a good but somewhat arbitrary set of people. Maybe this is an interesting way to like also bootstrap who are those 50 or 100 people that are quote unquote legit.
Right. And I think the fact that it's Nostr, it's open source actually matters.
Yeah.
Because do you know how messed up the peer review system is in academics?
I've heard it's awful, but I don't know the details.
So like if you write a paper, you become like part of this club who's on the inside, and you're in the circuit of people who are going to be asked for your review before something gets published. Well, if I'm going to publish something and I want you to be peer review, or like the journal who's going to suck all the value out of this thing is going, all the taxpayer dollars are going to get siphoned off by the journal selling subscriptions. But regardless of the business model being screwed up, I publish a paper. I want your peer review to say like, this is a good paper. Well, I know that that I'm going to be publishing it. I know that you're going to be publishing it. So like, are we ever going to say something negative?
Right.
So many of these things that are like peer reviewed, which is like, the gold standard, if you'll pardon, Bitcoin standard, gold standard of kind of scientific knowledge distribution today,
Right.
is actually the incentives are totally messed up. You actually can't get much genuine negative feedback on a peer review process.
And how do you see, the negative feedback coming here? Because it's open, anyone can contribute?
Anybody can contribute.
And it could be a NIM as well.
Yeah. And you can just be like, hey, have you considered this paper with this other idea that actually is in conflict with this?
Fascinating.
And
I love
this, a lot of these experiments you can't even reproduce.
And that's what I was going to say. Like almost all experiments are just like literally complete and utter bullshit, like all of it, right?
Yeah.
So how fascinating would it be if you could also just, this could be a way bigger breakthrough for humanity than I realized.
Yeah.
Imagine you publish the results for your study, your experiment, whatever. And then people just come and like straight up are like, I try to reproduce, I can't. Here's like documented step by step.
And nobody will say that today.
Yeah, but
if we're open,
if it's open and you do it as a pseudonym,
Yep.
and you can document and prove step by step you did everything they did, and it's not checking out, and then by the way, then you can start to have aggregation layers where it's like, okay, well, maybe that one person did something wrong, their opinion's whatever, not valid. But then over time, you start to build a reputation, and then you can have aggregators that say like, whatever, 100 people tried to reproduce it, 80 were able to, the 80 that did, legit, like, okay, there's like the trust rank evolves.
Right.
Man, I love it.
Artur,
Pablo, if y'all are both listening to this is a great chance to collaborate. This is so cool.
Yeah, there's so much to do here, and I think the thing is, one of the things that's come up a lot in discussions recently that I've been having is, I think it's a tough like needle to thread around being kind of big and ambitious and abstract.
Yeah.
And then also being so specific that it seems so inconsequential. Like, let's 12 of us gather together
One doc.
and highlight, Gigi's doc about highlighting.
I love it.
That's
I'm in.
actually a great product, but it sounds too small that almost like everybody's like, let's just do the general thing so you can do anything. And, it's sort of like the natural instinct, I think, of, software development is to do these very big, broad abstracts. And that's sort of in conflict with how actual social systems get built. Social systems get built in like very niche, specific ways. But then by the time most people have seen a social system, it's already at scale,
That's right.
definitionally, because otherwise you didn't see it. So most people's impression of Twitter is that they have a bunch of news sources on it, but it wasn't the case the first 100 users, right?
100% right. And I think it's interesting, and like maybe sort of analogy scales a little bit in layers, kind of like Bitcoin does.
Yeah.
When when our grandkids one day see it, they're like, oh, of course, there's just Bitcoin, as we talked about, the base Fed wire, and Lightning is layer 2, and there's the new Visas and MasterCards on top of that. If I were going to start a payment system, I would, do an ICO and build a whole thing from scratch. It's like, well, no, you didn't see the decades. And similarly here, I think that, if there's one big lesson I glean from all of the like Paul Graham, Y Combinator essays way back in the day, it's just like start with shit that doesn't scale.
Yeah.
Like you have to get some critical mass. Like, it can be a really small number of users, but like the only sign, that's one of the things, by the way, anyone listening, that I'm always looking for as an investor is, even if it's a small number of users, are those users like rabid about it?
Yeah.
Do they love it? Even if it's 10, do those 10 people come back every day? Do they talk about what you're building? Like Pablo and G talk about their addiction to Nostr software.
Yeah, totally.
If you have something with that kind of like, just like almost like unhealthy level of like, I gotta come back. Like, give me one more Nostr.
Right.
You got something.
Yeah. And I think the document idea, like highlighting on a document, is itself a really nice people discovery service.
I love when you said that. That's cool.
So instead of thinking about like, oh, you have to decide the taste of which algorithm you should use, instead it's like, if you care about the GG doc, here's like the 15 people who had the most highlights, who got the most zaps on their highlights from that doc.
I love it.
And now I'm like, oh, just follow all.
Yes.
Like these are the people that I want to be involved with, because like they're definitionally active
in an area that I care about.
It's like,
I think it's genius. Genius. And like so I'll give you a very specific example. And I think I shared this, I forgot if it was you or Artur or someone recently, but one of the guys, and someone that I would like to spend a lot more time, we should do our own show at one point just dedicated to this. I'm still going down the whole rabbit hole of him. I'm reading his like autobiography right now. But do you know who Ted Nelson is?
no.
Okay. Ted Nelson is the sort of, he's credited as the creator of the concept or the word hypertext. And he had a
okay.
whole lot of other thoughts about this. He was friends with like all the early internet guys. He's different in that he wasn't himself a developer, but was much more of just like a sort of creative, like artist. I think he like called himself once in a video like Steve Jobs without leverage or something like that. And he's extremely sharp. And he had this whole thing called Project Xanadu. And I think one of the things I tagged Pablo in a post is that we kind of have the ability to rebuild Project Xanadu. And part of the idea is that text, it shouldn't just be like, I click on a link and go to this one new site. It should be like, okay, I have a thing here. I see the context of that text next to it. And I can see how the piece of like a quote, for example, like a quote it's kind of almost like you can think like a quote tweet. Like I saw an essay with a quote tweet embedded and I can see off to the side the original piece that quote tweet came from. So you can see the full context and you can like trace basically like he had these different ideas around being able to like almost like move more fluidly through a concept of ideas and be able to see all of the web of interconnections and not just like one click.
That was Xanadu.
Yeah, there's a lot more to it. I'm certainly not an expert, right? But he also has some fantastic videos. Someone had this kind of like strange run-in in El Salvador, where someone who's clearly very sharp and deep in this world told me he thinks Ted Nelson has figured out who Satoshi is, and it's someone that no one ever talks about. It's like a Japanese math professor, and like watch his video on it. It's like actually quite compelling.
This is a video that Ted Nelson made.
Yeah, Ted Nelson published it. He probably lives here in the Bay Area. Probably get him on the show or something. But
he was like part of like Whole Earth Kevin Kelly group, or
which by the way, I have more to say on that too.
Right.
I don't know if he was certainly like a contemporary of theirs. He was doing a master's in sociology at Harvard when Timothy Leary and Ram Dass going through the Looking Glass were teaching there. So kind of contemporary. And then I think he was out here and friends with Douglas Engelbart and some of those guys.
Right. Okay, so like SRI.
I think so.
That group.
I think he maybe lived in the South Bay or whatever. But anyways, so he's definitely of that ilk. He was like, big, saw the wave of personal computing. But again, because he's not a developer, he never like built any of this stuff. He just kind of wrote about it. And but very sharp guy. And so he's still putting out these videos. And one of his videos, he claims to like have figured out who Satoshi was. That's a whole different rabbit hole, but it's fascinating. And he has very compelling arguments. I can't.
You buy it.
I wouldn't say I buy it, but I don't not buy it.
Okay.
I think it's fascinating. Like, and
I got to check it out.
He has these very kind of like interesting ways of, it's been a while since seen it. Like the TLDR, I suggest everyone do their own research, but the TLDR is basically, he's looking for someone that clearly is a genius in like multiple fields, takes those multiple fields together, drops like a groundbreaking piece of work, and then just like disappears to go work on the next one.
Right.
And so he found this math professor that like created some new branch of mathematics, also Japanese, was done a few years after Satoshi left. And basically it's like the mind that worked on this is going to only want to go after those like civilizational challenges and then get the fuck out.
Right.
Anyways, watch the video. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying it's wrong, but
Right.
like it's interesting. And he clearly has some creative sparks. My broader point in all this, and I think we should do a whole episode maybe with Pablo and Ted Nelson one day on like, how can we rebuild Xanadu on Nostr?
Wow.
Is for me, anyone that knows who the fuck Ted Nelson is, that's a strong signal. And if you have...
So the fact that I didn't jump is
sorry,
a strong
DK.
strong anti.
It's a strong anti-signal.
I've heard the name, but I didn't know.
No, and to be clear, you have so many strong signals and everything else. But this is one example. And so Jack Dorsey, he tweeted out Xanadu about Nostr. And so he called it some Ted Nelson magic. So he clearly, is a Nelson aficionado to some degree. And so then when he posted that, and I was like, oh, whoa, like Jack knows that's awesome. And then I started seeing a string of comments, right? And anyone that commented and had like something somewhat intelligent to say about, oh yeah, this is like Xanadu for these reasons, I followed all of them.
Oh, cool.
Because I knew if you know what Xanadu is,
I
like,
see.
chances are we have intellectual overlap.
I see. Yeah.
And so anyways, I that's all like one giant, and I feel like we have that, by the way, with Kevin Kelly,
Yeah.
Who I had the great pleasure of seeing this week, which we should talk about
You
that too.
already saw, or
It was like a book event on Monday night.
oh, okay, yeah.
So cool. Like that dude is a hero.
Oh yeah.
But and that, by the way, anyone that's reading Kevin Kelly books, someone that I would clearly follow as well.
Yep.
And
Anyone
so-
highlighting the Technium or KK.org.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. But this is my point.
Yeah.
It's like there's like a small set of thinkers I truly respect, and I would love to meet anyone and everyone that's truly trying to engage with them intellectually. That would be like a dream.
Yep.
So I think your people discovery service is like, I would be a power user.
Yeah. Well, I think the one I'm proposing is basically just a better highlighter. So hopefully Pablo,
if you're listening to this, like
land.
you've got a couple of like rabid fans that would
We're
love
ready
use the service.
I mean, let's pick the docs each day and
Absolutely.
just by force of will, make it happen.
Yes,
right?
and we can start with the Nostr and like, Bitcoin stuff, whatever. But yeah, it'd be awesome to get a couple of Ted Nelson docs, get a couple of Kevin Kelly docs,
Yeah.
like truly like what we actually want to see, right?
Yeah.
See who else out there. And by the way, it would also be awesome with this, not just highlighter, although you could do this with text as well. Music.
Oh yeah.
I would love to be able to say with Zapster, another Pablo creation, a group like Boards of Canada. Anyone that's listening to Boards of Canada, chances are we're probably gonna get along.
Right.
Would love to see that.
Yeah. I was actually talking to Oscar, who you introduced me to, about some of the stuff with Fountain because I was actually listening to the Nostrovia podcast with G and Pablo, and I was on a run, and they were just like cracking me up. It was right after they were talking about all itching from not being able to code that morning. And they were cracking me up, and then I think I forget exactly the quote. It was like, I think Pablo said, if you don't do open source, just like it's like it's network effects of you.
Oh yeah,
and
he's right.
Yeah, or maybe that was G's quote. They each said something funny like that, and I like stopped my run, and I like tried to get the text and get the link to the podcast and write it out and tag each of them properly and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, it's funny and I want to share it, but it was so painful I think I literally sat there for 5 minutes to construct the note, which I should have just been able to like dash it off.
Totally.
So my kind of proposal to Oscar is why can't we just like
share clips?
Why can't not only share clips, but have them transcribed and push them to Nostr nodes?
I love it.
Because what I want, like the reason, I mean, I just happen to have like habits with Overdrive as my daily driver podcast thing. And the idea of like listening to earn free sats is not my use case, but listening with better creative tools to push to Nostr would definitely sell me on a new podcast player.
I love it. And they're already doing clipping.
Yeah.
So it's like
they have good clips and
they're taking steps in that direction. I think one of their pieces of inspiration was, actually I'm speaking here completely out of band. I don't know if this is true or not, but like the Breaker app used to have like, you could like listen to like, who is Bill Gurley listening to or whatever. But I love that idea, but I think it's not just the clip, it's the transcription.
Yeah.
I would love to be able just to say, show me every transcribed note so we can look out for next week for Nostr News that Oscar, who has great taste as well, that he listened to.
Yeah. And did you see he did a transcript? They have a transcript video clipping or audio clipping transcript product that I haven't actually created with it, but when I proposed this idea...
Fountain does?
Yeah.
How did I miss this?
So I proposed this idea to Oscar, and he was like, oh, here's one I made of you and Max talking about Kevin Kelly. And he literally, this wasn't in the Kevin Kelly context. And he just shared, remember when we looked at the Technium, we read like the great primitives of the internet?
Which, by the way, that article you shared was so good. My girlfriend, she has her own startup. She immediately went and used that and like, it was like, oh my God, this is incredibly helpful for me to think about how we should be doing branding stuff. Like that was very valuable for her too.
That's great. So I wish I knew that Fountain had this service, but they basically create an audio kind of media unit that has a transcript that plays in kind of a video media unit of the audio. It's like the background of the podcast with the transcript playing while it, that media is playing.
I don't know how I missed that, but that's great.
Yeah. So he shared that with me and I actually re-noted it. Would you call them boosts anymore? Or are they called re-notes or quote notes? Yeah. But I re-noted that just yesterday, I think it was. So check on my recent
I will.
notes.
And that's awesome. Oscar, if you're happening to be listening to this, I love what you've already done, but I would love to just publish it as text on a note.
Yeah.
I think that's genius insight.
Yeah. That's what I want. And I proposed a bunch of stuff to him and he was like coming soon for kind of most of it. So I don't know. I don't want to pre-announce.
Cool.
I don't think I think they have their own roadmap and have their own ideas of exactly how these broad concepts should be implemented, but he wasn't he wasn't listening to these things I was saying and saying, you're full of shit.
Well, no, good. And by the way, Oscar, like credit to that guy, he has always seen ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
You know, I know they have a lot of different, you know, they're balancing, you know, limited resources, but he was early to embrace Nostr. I know they want to go big on Nostr. And, you know, he was one of the people that really helped me see the value of value rank. Like this idea that like an open social graph, an open payments graph together can be really valuable in surfacing information. So he's got a really good sixth sense.
Yeah, that's great. And so I think you had some commentary around the highlighter discussion, which you mentioned. And then I think you said you also had some feedback or commentary on the
Danny conversation. Yeah. So there's a couple things I want to say about this. I love that episode. There's even some like context on his background. I know the full story, so that was cool to hear. It's like, you know, you're kind of like friends. You never like ask all the questions.
Right.
Oh wow, I didn't know that. But a couple things that came out of that. So one thing is, I love that Danny is experimenting. He's one of the only people in the world, to the best of my knowledge, that is experimenting the intersection of Lightning, Nostr, and AI. And I think something in there is going to be extremely interesting. I think y'all had a couple of concepts I loved. One concept was the ability to crowdfund an AI-generated piece of art, which I think is just really simple, really cool. And again, it's that example of it almost seems a little kind of like a dumb toy, and it's not a big enough vision, but it's something some people will love, right?
And you can do it in a day, and
Yes.
you can like people can start playing with it and getting results within like minutes.
And those people, not everyone's going to love it, but those that do are going to really love it.
Yeah.
And then you can start to build out from there. Maybe start like, you know, maybe this is an area you mentioned that could, you know, potentially work with Geyser or something else as well. Think about more crowdfunding, bigger projects, or kind of what G's working on with Nostr or Nostr Rocket, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I love it again. And I think this is a really important insight. If anyone's out there as a builder, entrepreneur, like I really think you can't take this to heart enough. Start with something small, doesn't scale. Just like get a really small but like rabid user base. 10 people, totally fine.
Yeah.
But like they need to love it. And so anyway, so I would love to see, and I hope Danny will, you know, ship something like that. And I think there's just so much potential for it. But it triggered also in something in me that I wanted to mention, because I think it's a really important concept and I want to get your feedback on. It started hitting me now. Like it's interesting. Like I like as someone who just loves seeing like ideas evolve and the history of ideas.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, it's not in the air. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I hear it every day.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because the idea, like the necessary Kevin Kelly talks a lot about this. It's like you need the building blocks for the new idea to be ready. And once it is, like calculus gets discovered by multiple people at once simultaneously, blah, blah. And so the idea that's been for me in the new sphere recently is that in addition to just Nostr, the thing that can make Lightning really pop off this year is AI, but specifically, there's different versions of this. The one that I like the most right now is protecting against AI chargebacks.
Okay.
Now, there's a couple ways. My first kind of iteration of this thinking was, okay, it'd be nice if you could just do like a Satoshi payment, a Lightning payment for some kind of infrastructure. So we talked about with Nostr for relays. We talked about, you know, potentially paper API call for, you know, and some people were doing that with like, oh, I've got like OpenAI credits. I'm going to sell for a small premium, some ARB. Satoshi payments, Danny has like a product like that as well. And I think there's still something there. I can't quite put my hand around why that's so important. But what someone really brought to my attention yesterday, it just was like, oh man, it was so clear, is that, you know, most people don't know how the payment system works. And I'm not saying I'm an expert in this, but like chargebacks are a huge problem.
Right.
And they have the potential to be a much bigger problem. So if I'm a merchant and, you know, you buy my shirt online, and then you basically like, I never received the shirt, but you did receive the shirt, you know, the merchant generally ends up eating that cost. Mm-hmm. And they say, okay, there's going to be in their models some percentage of just, we just eat that cost. And it's fine because most people are not malicious. And if you do it enough times, your account will probably get banned or whatever. Right. But like, that's just like part of the way business gets done. But soon we're going to have AIs, like very soon, I think within the next 12 months, certainly the next 24, maybe sooner, at the rate this is all going, that whether it's via voice, can simulate a human voice, or form entry can basically spoof or like act like a human to spoof things like, you know, there's systems like SIFT data science and others that are trying to do fraud detection. Yeah. But the AIs will get good enough very quickly to just outsmart all of those systems. Mm-hmm. And so if that's the case, then you've got this threat in the world. And I don't know which one's going to be the biggest to break first, where, you know, the AIs can potentially order a whole bunch of stuff and then just not pay.
And why are the AIs? I mean, what would encourage an AI to order stuff that it doesn't want?
Well, someone on their behalf, right? Someone's using an army of AIs, either just to like wreak havoc as they can, or, maybe they use this as part of a broader plan to get free stuff. And like, you know what I'm saying? But it's like right now
getting the stuff shipped.
And the idea, and I'm not sure exactly what the let's use a really simple example, a pizza, right? But like, you're not doing it on Uber Eats. You order the pizza, you like use, and in the past there was like some limit on this because like kind of like the spammers that are coming out of Russia or wherever, like it's kind of a cat and mouse game to do this right now. But there's only so much one person can do. But you could potentially order like 1,000 pizzas or something to your house from 1,000 different places, get the pizzas, just not pay, see what they do. And yeah, like I guess the difference thing is now you can use an army of AI bots to do this over and over and over again.
Like robocallers?
Robocallers, that's the voice example. I think just doing it online, having them act like humans, because some of these like data science and stuff, they try and say, well, this is probably a bot that ordered it, so don't take that. Right? Anyways, I'm still trying to formulate what the first big use case is going to be, but the broader point is AIs are going to be able to outsmart a lot of fraud detection systems. Mm-hmm. And so chargebacks could very quickly become a much bigger problem because like the way our chargeback system works is not really built for an AI world.
Right.
And so I could see, I don't know what the first use case is going to be quickly, but as people start realizing, wait a second, our fraud detection systems are pretty gameable and gameable at a scale they weren't with humans, then maybe that's where people start saying, no, actually, I only want to take, this person said crypto, but in my case, Bitcoin Lightning, like bearer asset payments. Like you have to basically like pay in real time to get the thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess there's certainly a lot of changes with AI that could change the sort of cat and mouse game with fraud detection. So I'm sort of with you on that. I'm not sure if like I guess my optimism on some of this stuff in AI and Lightning. I actually wrote a tweet this morning about this because a lot more of my kind of AI crew is on Twitter than Nostr.
Yeah, for now.
For now. But I wrote a thing about that because I think, this concept of machine-to-machine payments or kind of small payments to people who are doing bits of human eval type work. There's this concept, called reinforcement learning with human feedback, which is typically today used to train an AI model. And the human feedback portion is basically a set of people you hire who are on your staff or payroll, or you have their bank details and you pay them money for the work they do. And then you have the model, and you take that model and you do something else with it that doesn't involve the human feedback. And the stuff that I feel like is kind of interesting at the edge of this is that you can take that human feedback and more easily bake it directly into a product. And you can have it as part of the UX of a product where people may get paid. almost like the way a CAPTCHA works, but maybe you get paid for like, hey, you're enjoying the product, we can make it better for you, or you can help do a little task that helps us make it better for everybody, or we observe some way that you use the UX and it's almost like a slot machine. You did thing X and you happen to get a little payment for it because, that thing that you were just doing was just part of our test process, right?
Right.
So some way to use Lightning payments to help with kind of the human feedback portion of a thing that might have real UX and real purpose for being, or there's maybe a machine-to-machine interaction that we don't know exactly, it's too heavy to create structured contracts and long-term relationships, but you can sort of, have one machine do part of a training workload for you and have another machine do part of an inference for you, and then it can assemble it in some way. So I don't know. I this is actually an area I want to find somebody. I've been talking to some people kind of offline, but I want to find somebody who wants to come on and talk about this, who's kind of from
I would love that.
The AI world, spending all their time on that, but maybe not from the Bitcoin Lightning, Nostr, decentralized technology world, but start to understand like what are the limitations around training and the costs associated with it and running inferences.
Yeah, I love that.
And can you do that in a decentralized workload way? Like which parts of them are likely to be decentralized early?
Yeah. Well, okay. So, I mean, that sparked a lot of thoughts. One is that there is a company, Stackwork, which has been doing a little bit of the stuff for a while. The guy, Paul Itway, behind Sphinx Chat as well. In theory, he's supposed to come to this event we're doing next week.
Oh,
also.
Cool.
So it'd be cool for you to chat with him. And Paul is someone that always seems kind of far ahead of the curve. I don't think he is big on Nostr yet. He may be. So it'll be really interesting to get.
He's just not active, or he has some concerns with it?
I don't know. I just haven't seen him on there. So,
Okay.
but to be fair, I don't think he uses Twitter much anyway. So maybe he is interested in it. But like a lot of his vision, and he's already doing some of this, like essentially paying people to do training of models and stuff, right? And Lightning is like a really convenient payment system for them to use for that, for many reasons, including you don't have to create an account, right? Or whatever. Especially if the payments are small enough, you may not even need a KYC or whatever. Anyways, but I think a lot of his ideas could be very well applied over Nostr now. And so I'm curious to see where he comes. And yeah, you guys should definitely do a jam.
Yeah.
The other thing though is, I would love to hear, I would love to hear a video with you and a non-Nostr Bitcoin person kind of trying to figure out where's the first place that Lightning payments really solve a problem for machine-to-machine payments. I'm 100% like, if you look 10 years out, all machines are not Bitcoin Lightning wallets. Of course, they're not going to be using Visa, MasterCard. And so that makes a ton of sense to me. But I'm curious, like, what's that first big spot to break? Is it, I have some budget, I'm your personal AI assistant, and you said, hey, solve this problem for me. Here's $200. Do whatever needs to be done. And to do that, maybe I need to interact with the traditional fiat system to buy plane tickets for you, but I also need to be able to pay for my own electricity costs or whatever it is. Right. And so I'm curious what that first big use case is going to be. One hunch I've had is that somehow it's going to be related to Nostr. And the reason is just we already have the norms here where, you can have AI bots that have their own Nostr pub keys,
right,
which is a Bitcoin wallet. And we already have the norm of paying for the first resource storage in sats. So maybe it's something like, maybe these like Nostr AIs really take off in Nostr first. But I don't know. What do you think is going to be the first one to break?
Yeah, I mean, I'm more. I think I'm more leaning toward the things that are like a decentralized workflow or like a distributed workload, where there's going to be a bunch of machines doing little bits of a job.
Got it.
And how do you figure out who did which bits of the job? And do you actually? I was talking to some AI people about this, and they're like, well, you could just have like a bunch of, these A100s are kind of the main machines. You have a bunch of A100s, and you could run some, and somebody else could run another. Somebody else could run another, and you just like dispatch.
For people that don't know, that's a GPU or
it's like the NVIDIA. It's like the standard NVIDIA machine that everybody uses. But you could basically dispatch a workload to machine cluster A, or person who controls machine cluster A over here. Dispatch the same workload to machine cluster B over here, run by a different operator, and see if they come up with the same result. Then you consider it a good result, and if they come up with different results, you maybe ask a third. But all of the coordination of those, we don't have a way to do that today. So instead, you just like throw up a bunch of machines yourself and charge for the API. So I think the fact that
just to play devil's advocate on that a little bit, I like this concept, but like for the bigger companies, aren't they kind of doing that already, but just paying in batch? Like
the bigger companies are doing that.
But so you're saying for more like smaller.
Well, I'm concerned about the centralizing nature of AI.
Yeah, me too.
And so this is not a way that a large AI company would choose to behave.
Got it.
This is like a force that could push back against the centralizing nature of some of the large AI companies.
So I love that philosophically. What would be like super concrete? Like what would be a first business use case for like one business to do this and one business to purchase that service?
So I don't know all of how the infrastructure flows, but like you're familiar with Midjourney?
Yeah.
So Midjourney, they have to train models that enable them to generate the images that they do, right? And so you can imagine, instead of being dependent on Midjourney to do that, you could post a note to Nostr, and you could have a bunch of machines all over the internet, like the same way we kind of have relays, who've done part of a training set. And I don't know all the coordination details. There's a lot to do there, but I could ask that thing and I could pay that thing, and whoever has part of the result could each get paid a fraction of that.
Yeah.
And I think it's very credible that Midjourney is doing tens of millions of US dollar revenue today. And I've heard some people say much more than that.
Yeah.
And so in a sense, that is a revenue stream that is up for grabs that people are willing to pay for, that's done in a very centralized way today.
Yeah.
I don't know if that can be done in a decentralized way, but could you take the training style that they use.
Yep.
And Stability AI and Stable Diffusion, has relevant stuff that's more open source and kind of
right.
pushing back in a healthy way. But I think the Stable Diffusion models, my understanding is they're not yet really trying to kind of push it to the edges where people get paid for contributing to a greater whole. I think they're just trying to like make it open source and available to anybody to do. But why can't you kind of let everybody run a little bit of it?
I love it.
In whatever way they want.
So this gets me excited for so many reasons. One is that for the last several years, I've had this idea, like a lot of like ICOs, the shitcoins back in 2017 are good ideas, but I've always thought somehow we're going to get done over Bitcoin Lightning. And then Ryan and Drew have had their great talk about how you could potentially do, messaging on top of Bitcoin Lightning as well.
Yep.
And now I think that maybe that's going to be done over Nostr, but it's like, Golem, which was this ICO back in 2017, is like distributed compute, like all things talk about distributed. This is how we build the hive mind. Yeah. This is how we build the distributed hive mind. Getting all excited and gesticulating is, you want to spread computation. And I'm skeptical that it's going to be like at home computation at first. Maybe it's going to be like kind of like mid-sized data centers and then eventually it kind of spreads to a longer tail. But like storage, bandwidth, compute, like why can't we have all of those things? And by the way, because, machines will need to kind of like acquisition in real time, little bits of it. You say AI, do this thing for me, like AI, like create this image for me. In order to do that, the AI needs to go and like buy various resources from lots of these clusters.
Yep. And I think we see that happening in relays today on a very small, hobbyist, kind of optimized scale, right? Yeah. So can you take those same concepts that already kind of work in a unstructured, unoptimized way and kind of build other systems for different purposes that have some similar loose affiliation but payment ability?
I love it. A little bit maybe of this will come out next week, but we should do like an AI plus Nostr / Lightning. Like try and get as many AI people talking to Lightning and Nostr people as possible. Something massive is there.
Yeah. I've got a few people that I've been thinking about how to get. I want to create a conversation that would be like enough of each side that it's interesting and kind of hopefully brings us to new information, new knowledge.
I would love to be part of that.
I'm thinking about that. So let's turn to some of the links because we got a lot of links to talk about, right?
That's right.
Collecting. We'll see what we haven't touched on yet. So let me pop over to here. I just shared this because I was this person on Nostr, Lysander Spooner, was writing Nostr is shrinking, not growing. It failed to reach critical mass because every third post generously is a Bitcoin ad. And they were looking at Arthur's stats dashboard.
Yeah.
And so they were saying, look closely at the month separated retention of all users 30 days after signing up %. And so I wanted to pull that one up. And I've got it here teed up. Yeah, so here's retention of all users 30 days after sign up. And I think if I understand right, he's saying this is the most recent cohort. So January through March. This is the April cohort. This is the March cohort. And you can see, I think he correctly points out that the March cohort was better than the current cohort.
And remind me just what we're looking at here.
This is retention of all users. So this is 30 days after signing up. So like, I don't know if this is on the third day after sign up.
30% are still using it.
30% are still using it.
Okay.
And by the time you get to the 30th day, only 5.9% are using it.
Got it. Okay.
I think is, and if you go back 1 month before that, you have even
more
better, and 1 month before that, you have even better.
Got it.
And so I think the observation he is making is that the retention is not that good.
Right.
Which I think is a thing to be concerned about.
Yeah.
But yeah, and so I think there's like a bunch of factors here. One could be that and I see I've got can't see all the details there from the way we've got the screen composed, but I think one of the things to be mindful of here is that people are coming on and probably have less context. Like somebody who comes on today probably has less context than somebody who came on, say, 2 months ago, 3 months ago.
For sure, yeah.
And they're kind of maybe a lot of the people we know who came on 2 or 3 months ago kind of already knew a lot of people on, or were sort of trying to come to it with some expectation of who they should be meeting there. And maybe there's less of that now is one thing. So one idea that I wanted to kind of reemphasize, which we talked about before, but I think that onboarding experience may be a big part of what enables people to get connected and get information flowing, and so have a better experience. So I would agree. I think the kind of the assessment that the retention curves are weaker than we would expect to see in a growing product are true and concerning, I don't think it means the protocol doesn't work or that like the ecosystem can't win, or an ecosystem with these kinds of properties. I don't think that's the case at all. But I do think there's a whole different set of challenges with how you get people connected to high quality information and what are the products that we're running toward that we want to use and find, and then people who've never seen those products want to come and be a part of that instead of just coming to play around with the kind of like, Twitter expat community that we mostly are today.
Well, I mean, I think that, it's a fair, concern, but at the same time, it's like, to your point, it's not surprising at all. It's like the first couple of cohorts, like us, for example, were people that were already Bitcoiners and interested in sort of, call it freedom technology or whatever, more broadly. And so the low hanging fruit, there's less and less low hanging fruit, right? Like if there's, call it, whatever, 1 million Bitcoiners on Twitter, we've already got over half. And so, it's like a lot of them came over in those earlier cohorts, and that makes sense to me. They already had, like, to your point, they knew friends that were helping them on board. They found discussion of a topic that interested them. And now, as you've already shaken the low-hanging tree and you start to get a new ones, like you're getting people that don't have necessarily friends. They read about it in Forbes. Maybe they're not like, following Jack Dorsey super closely. And they're not that interested in Bitcoin. So of course they're having trouble. But I don't, again, that doesn't really concern me for two reasons. One, because to our point earlier about the kind of Paul Graham insight, the people that love Nostr are rabid about it, like obsessive, right? Just listen. If you want to hear that, just listen to Pablo and G, talk about their addiction. So that doesn't concern me. I do think that like adoption will go in waves. And so some of the users that are churning, I think, you don't get infinite shots on goal with them, but they'll come back when the user experience is way better. So I agree with you. I think we've shaken the low-hanging fruit of the tree. There's probably still a couple more Bitcoiners to get. We've kind of got that group. And now I think the next quarter, the next 3 months is going to be what's that next experience beyond Bitcoin, and how do you find people that are interested in whatever that thing is or things, discover that. And so I'm really excited to see, I know Rabble is thinking about how does he bring some of his kind of activity pub, which is like one step away. It's still interested in decentralized protocols, but not Bitcoiners. You've got, some marketplaces that are coming on, the ordinals, the degens, maybe they're the next one. But like the point is it's probably going to be only like one step away each time. But like, I think it's totally makes sense, totally fine. But I think there's, if anything, a lot of room for entrepreneurs and builders to come in right now and solve these different problems of how do you solve discovery? How do you, build an app for an adjacent, but not the same sort of Bitcoin super freedom tech people.
So if only we had a great highlighter is what you're saying, right?
I think, seriously, the highlighter app, the music app, I think both of those, the ordinals marketplace, all three of those ideas, the AI, generated art thing, any of those could pop.
Cool. Other links we were looking, you wanted to talk about the general stats dashboard from primal.net?
Yeah, I just thought it was interesting. We always look at Nostr Band, and I thought, it'd be interesting to just compare. Primal has its own view. They're calling it 480,000-ish users, which again is pretty damn good if that's right. Like, yes, only call it, 20,000 of them are posting every week. Maybe it's a little bit more than that, but, that's about 1%. And so that's kind of to be expected. Archer's got on Nostr Band, something like 15, 16,000 people a week. That makes sense. I guess my only question here is just like, I'm curious, millions, Primal's count, it's a little under 500. I think Archer, if you go to his count, he has, in terms of total users, a couple of different ones. The closest count he has is people with profiles with contact list. Right?
That's the red one.
The red one, yeah. So that's about 750 or so K, millions of around 450K. So I'm curious kind of what that discrepancy is. Do you have any idea what the difference? I mean, it's not that far off.
It's not, same order of magnitude, and I'm sure there's just different, criteria. Like, having a contact list is one type of criteria. Maybe in Primal it's a contact with at least 10 contacts on it or something, right? So,
but I think it's like pretty fair to say there's somewhere on the order of 500,000 people that are using this.
Yeah. Or I guess who have kind of used it in a kind of set up a proper account.
in a meaningful way.
Yeah. And then, in the range of 18,000 that use it, posted at least
That
once
are
a week.
posting. And
Right.
I think it's
And
very,
a lot
very
of people
likely
read who don't post.
that exactly. It's probably 2 orders of magnitude higher lurkers is my guess.
Well, so 17,000 posters weekly.
Mm-hmm.
So 170,000 to 1.7 million.
Oh, yeah, maybe it's not that high then. Okay, so I'm just going off the 1% kind of general internet rule for like Reddit and other forums.
Okay.
But maybe, I think we've talked about this before, maybe because there's like a higher percentage of people that is like, of the initial adopters of Nostr, maybe there's a much higher percentage. It's not 1% that are active, but 5%.
Yeah, yeah.
And so if that's the case, let's say there's, just to make the math simple, there's 20,000 people using it a week and 20 times that are reading it.
Right.
So that would be about 400,000.
Got it. Yep. Checks out. Cool. Should we jam through some other links here? We got the rise of the paid Nostr relay.
Yeah, this is a little bit old. The only reason I pulled this up, we already kind of went through this now, is just to show the GitHub stars.
Okay, yeah.
Andre was the one
We
to
checked
show
out that already.
It was just really interesting to see how fast Nostr's growing.
This was one, the Nostr micro apps. So I think, a lot of people have this idea, when you come to Nostr, you're like, oh, cool. It's a new, I call it kind of a new protocol for publishing on the web. Some people say it's a decentralized social network. I think when, how you come to it actually may suggest what kinds of things you look for from it or what kinds of things you might seek to build. And I think the standard model of kind of building products is kind of build everything full stack, the database, the front end, the discovery service, the identity, all web, mobile platforms, et cetera. And I think there's a new thing that's, people are starting to recognize, which is like you can get very, very deep on one very important piece of the ecosystem and then use that with everybody else and make that available to everybody else. Mm-hmm. And we don't really have, like in centralized services, we don't really have the model of how that should look. Mm-hmm. So I like this. This kind of shows micro apps. So this is Bookmarks, is a bookmarking app.
Are these live?
I believe so, yeah. I think that's why he shared this. So there's
That's cool.
A Bookmarks app, a Pastebin app, a mind map app, to-do list, calendar, encrypted Pastebin, shortcut, and Kanban board. And then, of course, Pablo saying add Zapster.
That's dope. I didn't realize there's that many different micro apps already.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and there's even more than this. I think he was just highlighting some of his favorites or the top ones.
Cool.
But I think like a micro app around identity management, right? Like Nostr.
Yeah.
It's kind of like or Albi is like a identity management micro app, a micro app for onboarding.
Let's pause there for a second. Imagine, your Albi, a lot of people are using you to log in. And maybe it's not that, maybe it's someone completely independent. What does your ideal onboarding micro app look like?
Well, it is login and identity management tied to onboarding?
Maybe not.
Like they could be related, but it might be that, Albi just focuses on like
login,
key generation and login. Mm-hmm. And then somebody else, does like, maybe like a kind of the discovery services or like the trust rank stuff Archer's doing, or some of the discovery services that that Primal's building. Maybe those become pluggable pieces that if you're building a new app, you grab Albi for login, you grab, Primal's discovery service for onboarding, and then you grab, I don't know, maybe there's some Damus component for how a social feed looks, and you use those building blocks. Those are the atomic units, and you assemble them. They're all open source, and you don't necessarily fork them, but you just incorporate them. I think actually related to this, I think Damus just incorporated like a local relay or something. Did you see that?
No, I didn't.
So just different ways that you think about these things not as full stack apps, but you think of them as like, I'm going to remix and assemble these atomic units that other people have built. I'm not going to reinvent the wheel each time. And I'm only going to do one thing that I do really well.
So I love all that. Specifically onboarding though. Like imagine you're complete new. Like what does that flow look like?
I mean, I think it's, we were talking about this offline, but I think it's, just like maybe generate a key and maybe give me very, minimal information about what that means. You don't have to push it in front of me. and then give me like maybe topics to follow that have people attached to them that I can follow, and then I'm onboarded.
Got it.
Right? That seems like the minimal. Profile creation, right? So maybe way to upload a profile. Maybe there's a pet name, kind of username-ish thing, but that might actually create confusion. But each of those things feels like the kinds of things that could be, like an onboarding app, like micro app specific thing. And then anybody building an app could use a configurable version of the onboarding flow that so-and-so built.
And then when the flow is done, they're imported into your app, whether that's Damus or Primal or whatever. Yeah. I like that.
Same way. I mean, think about it. Think about if you onboard to Primal today and use their discovery services, you find people to follow, and then you have those in the contact list tied to your public-private key pair.
Right.
Well, that's effectively you've used the micro app of Primal to do discovery, but you could take that and go to Snort or Iris or
much more plug and play.
So it already does work that way, but I think we're not maybe collectively thinking about the world as like assemblies of micro apps instead of full stack apps.
Got it.
Not that there's anything wrong with full stack apps, just like a lot of work. So hopefully if you're doing full stack, you're really nailing like some really important features that only hang together in the specific flow you have in mind, versus if you're just kind of doing generalized discovery, generalized key management,
right,
whatever, like why not, why reinvent the wheel? It's kind of like open source philosophy, but applied to like, the idea of a full stack app versus like a Lego building blocks kind of atomic unit assembly.
That. And then allows different people to be kind of the best, like to really get good at discovery or really get good at the onboarding flow. And
and if you really get good at discovery, I don't think you become the discovery tastemaker, but you kind of set the definition of how discovery services should be built. Yeah. And maybe you're one of the common ones, but you're also pluggable.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So you kind of like help move forward how discovery services should be built.
And then eventually I can see, something like a Damus, I guess some people have already compared it to like a browser, maybe it's more like an app store, but then you can like, or like, I like the Umbrella app store. Like it's a really nice way to look at it. Like you can just start having all these little apps. You just, whatever, I'm already plugged them, whatever, loaded in here and like, oh, like here's my music player. Here's my this, here's my that.
And search is another obvious, micro app. Wallets are another obvious micro app. Maybe media playing.
AI assistant,
yeah. So there's all kinds of, it's so different of a way to think about the world. You don't have like a lot of evidence of how that would work, because in the past, every centralized system had to kind of full stack it, right?
Yeah, it's awesome.
And
also it kind of, one of the theses I've been developing over time as an investor is that, because of open source software, because of AI, like making developers that are good even better, the 10x engineer becomes a 100x engineer.
Right.
And now open source is on steroids with Nostr.
Yeah.
There's a very good chance that companies or projects or whatever the form takes, like maybe like it becomes a norm that like, one dev or like a team of like 10 devs, like that's the whole company.
Oh yeah.
And so like the bloat that you see at a place like Twitter when Elon just slash 90% of the work for it or whatever it was, like maybe that's just the norm. It's like the teams are just gonna be like really small, but there's gonna be that long tail of like custom experiences.
Yep. Well, I mean, and that's kind of the looser federation of a team is kind of what Nostr and G are kind of aiming at, right? So I think that the trend you're observing is consistent with, I think, the trend he's observing, but kind of coming at it from a different angle. Yeah,
it's exciting.
This was, so you've seen the GitHub, the bounty that I think it was one of the largest bounties we've seen,
and then he increased it.
So I think Jack originally proposed the GitHub bounty, and then he increased it. Is it on Bouncer, right?
I think so. Yeah.
BOUNTSR.com.
And I think he 10x'd it even. Like
and it like grew huge, and then still nobody's really jumped on it, and so he's starting to say maybe the bounty isn't the right way to fund the work, which I think also touches on some of these kind of broader themes, which is how would you get this built? Maybe it should be built in a much more atomic way, where you don't try to do all of GitHub right now, but you figure out either can you break it down into smaller components that themselves can be, like we need some sort of file storage thing.
Yep.
And I think people talk about the BitTorrent, approach to file storage and, the identity systems that are getting built. But if you sort of really focus on having all these micro apps and I think Nostr, again, touches on some of these themes. So if you get people building these things in little pieces and then somebody comes in and assembles them, but isn't necessarily going after a full top-down end-to-end GitHub, but you kind of figure out the components and pieces that are needed to build GitHub, and you do each one in in the 6-hour chunk, to sort of use G's, analogy. 6-hour piece of work to build a 6-hour piece of work component, check it in, make it available to the world, and then over time we'll end up with GitHub. So I think that's like one credible path. The other credible path that I could imagine here is that I think if we do have a kind of a censorship resistant or a new style of managing a Git repository, it would not surprise me if there's also an enterprise offering that could be built around that.
Yeah, so it's just a company.
So kind of the Fediment thing. It's like if you define the protocol, build a bunch of the open source software, and then build kind of a commercial service at the edge of it that still enables that to flourish, and people can take it in all kinds of different directions, but then you're doing all of your own kind of customer acquisition and customer service and kind of managing, helping customers use the open source software more easily. And I think we already have evidence of this in the Git ecosystem. I think GitLab is mostly that style of thing, and certainly GitHub monetizes through those kind of paid accounts.
I'm interested in both options. I'd love to see people try both. As an investor here, I'll say if someone wants to take that idea and run with it and try and build GitHub and then figure out how to do an enterprise version later, I'm interested.
Yeah, cool. So it sounds like that could be that sounds like it's a fundable idea in your mind as like a commercial.
Definitely. And in general, like I'm a big fan of this, like the open source idea of just like give it all away, charge enterprises for hosting and whatever support.
Right.
Sure.
By the way, have you run across, do you know Joseph Jacks, or did you see the...
Well, I watched part of part of your video with him. That's like his thesis, right?
That's his whole thing, is kind of going after... He's like kind of...
He's right.
Not super Nostr focused, but he's super open source focused.
Yeah.
And so...
I mean, that's an area that I would like to spend even more time, but I generally agree with what I understand his thesis to be, which is that in the future, all software is open source. Mm-hmm. Or like 99.9% or something.
Yep.
Which is great for the for the world and humanity.
Yep.
I think we can like
Carnage Post?
Yeah, like
Okay,
a
we
lot of
talked
it's just
about
like we
some
need
of
better onboarding.
I don't know why is that.
Let's see your history.
That was about. What do we have here? Oh, we were looking at the Stacker News kind of substacks, subreddits. Right?
Yeah, and I just thought, I mean, this is really cool. Kian, who for the last couple of sprints has been working on his new Nostr client, came back and he had some stuff he wanted to do on Stacker News. And actually, I got to spend a good part of last week with Kian.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, it was in Austin.
Oh, right.
I think it was last week, right? Like the weeks have been running together lately. And he told me he wanted to do a sprint on Stacker News. And so I was like, maybe I'll do a couple of bug fixes. And of course it's Kian, so you get this incredible new feature shipped.
Yeah.
But I just thought it was interesting because, so he's basically this concept of subs, which is, I think it's both an illustrative point for what we were saying about how a startup starts and scales, and then also like some of the UI and potentially, discovery solutions that could apply to Nostr as well.
Yep.
So Kian, who I know is himself very much a student of Paul Graham as well, he really liked this idea of start with something really small, really rabid community, and let it grow from there. And so when I think when both of us first found Stacker News and invested in that, it was not a big community, but the people that were on it were like super into it. And it was clearly the highest signal Lightning community. And I remember being like, all right, there's not a lot of people today, but if you buy that Lightning and Bitcoin are going to keep growing, this is the highest signal forum. It's going to keep growing. And I think we reached a point where, okay, now we've got, I don't know, the last time I checked, 50, 60,000 monthly active views or whatever it is. Monthly viewers, not active views, whatever. And now, organically, at one point a few months ago, we discussed, well, what should the next sub be? Maybe it's AI, which I still think would be cool. Maybe it's something else. And then kind of, naturally Nostr was pulled out as the next big subject, which is great. And now I think Kian is kind of like, okay, cool. This is a good opportunity to say, like, there are some Bitcoiners that frankly don't care about Nostr and maybe vice versa. Great.
Yep.
They can quickly decide what's tagged Nostr, what's Bitcoin, and, start to have subs kind of like Reddit.
Yep.
And I think in Nostr as well goes this idea with hashtags, or, maybe you have like specific apps that are focused on specific themes, or relays that are focused on specific things. Although I'm less bullish on that particular vision, but maybe the point is, I think that we're moving into a world where we can go beyond just Bitcoin, at least on Stacker News, and now I think on Nostr as well.
Right. And do you know, because I know he built a relay and a client.
Have you seen his landing page?
I haven't played with it
Let's
yet.
pull it up. It's dope.
Oh, okay.
So it's just a landing page right now, but again, it's called
Is it?
outer.space. So if you guys haven't gotten on here yet, you can pay to get your nip.
I've been to the landing page, yeah.
And I love that, by the way, just like his like small taste, right? Like
Yeah.
you've got the UFO and the alien finger.
Right.
Anyways, so this is not shipped yet, but
Right.
you can reserve a name right now.
And is this going to be, do you know anything more about this from your time, or you just don't want to pre-announce?
I don't know what all he wants to share, and frankly, I don't even know that much myself, because Kian, I think he likes to like ship rather than talk.
Yeah, yeah.
But what I can say is, I think he's thinking about what does a client for like non-Bitcoin obsessed people look like, which I'm excited about. I think he and other people I know, he's thinking about this. Primal's thinking about this. A lot of people are thinking like, how do we break out of our little cocoon?
Yeah, yeah. Great.
Anyways, I just thought subs were cool though, and like it's a pretty big feature. I'm curious. My only concern with it, I don't know if how you would think about this, is like, I do wonder if we have quite enough density yet. Maybe it's a little early, but there's probably enough density with Nostr that some people just want Nostr. But
Yeah, I think there's enough overlap, but then enough difference. Like that one, I've seen some people come on and be like, I don't want to see all the Bitcoin advertisements.
Yeah.
Which there's no actual advertisements, but just like people talking about Bitcoin, they, I guess, consider advertisements.
yeah.
So yeah, I think
Stop shilling your sats.
I think there's enough people who are curious and interested in Nostr, but maybe aren't really interested in hearing about Bitcoin anymore right now, which is totally fine. So if that's sort of how they fit, then like, here's a great place, Stacker News. I guess, I don't know, the mechanics of earning Lightning if you actually don't care about Bitcoin may be a little in conflict with each other.
Maybe. But even those people are probably like, I mean, maybe some people don't want it at all, but like, you're probably like, oh, free money, whatever it is.
Yeah. Cool. Speaking of money and Zapvertising, right? This was a topic. I just saw this from, I think it's Walker who wrote this, right?
And I actually don't know him, but
okay. We've sort of bumped into each other a bunch on Nostr, but I don't know too much about him. I think he started this Footster. Is he the one who started the meme around?
Well, I looked at his profile just in kind of preparing for this, and apparently he both started the Footster thing, which is like some kind of like foot fetish chain, or I don't know, whatever. And then he also started, apparently he was the one that created the Nostrich as like the logo for Nostr.
Oh, he is
I believe so.
the creator of, like, we wouldn't have ostriches as part of it.
I think that's right.
Oh, wow.
And so whoever this guy is, he clearly has, some taste and ability to get his ideas out.
Yeah.
So anyways, and so this article, I liked it. I'm not sure I agree with all of it yet. I'm still kind of getting my head around it, but I think it's plausible and it's worth exploring. And so his whole idea is, take a step back. Why do ads have to suck? Like, no one loves ads. And I think he uses this example where, and it ties into some of Gigi's stuff around value for value. Like, he has this excellent article that talks about this. Like, why is it that, in our current model, our current advertising model is not really working for anyone that well, right? Like, you, as an advertiser, end up paying a lot. Most of that goes to the platform. Very little reaches the creator. So the creator's not winning that much. They're kind of getting peanuts. The only one that's really winning is the platform, the Google or the Facebook. The advertiser, meanwhile, they're getting like impressions and maybe clicks, but they don't really care about any of that. They just want sales, right? So it's not like that directly linked for them. Meanwhile, I always feel about this for content creators as well, and like, not to be like too like judgy or whatever, but I'm like, doesn't it just like suck to sell your soul to like get up there and like shill something? And some people kind of get around this by saying like, I only shill products I use myself, which, okay, that's a step in the right direction. But like, imagine, I don't know, you're like someone with a lot of people on Instagram, like, hey, here's this like whatever amazing energy drink. It's just like, oh man. Or even like sports stars have always felt that like, I'm a Grizzlies fan, and I remember just like, everyone does this, but I remember, when Ja or Morant had like a big Powerade deal or something. I was like, you probably don't like power.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
it just feels so shallow. It's just gross.
It feels kind of like just some different era.
Yeah.
Like where, I don't know, where like there were three channels on TV and it's all these big national advertisers. And it's just like, nobody cares about this stuff. Come on.
Well, not only that, but like I just imagine like as the person, I get it, you have to make money.
Yeah.
But like as the person signing these endorsement deals, unless it's something you truly do love,
Like
and,
BlockFi.
oh my, I mean, not to call out, but all those podcasting, everyone knows which one we're talking about. Like every single thing they showed went under, right? Like literally, it was like, man, like you're just draining threes here, just like literally, I got to the point where I was just like, all right, if there's an ad on these specific podcasts, run.
Right.
Anyways,
Signal.
and
I think that's part of the problem though, is that it's like the worse the advertiser behaves as a business,
Yeah.
the more they make, the more they can afford to pay for advertising.
how fucked up is that? Like, why is that the state of our world? Like, the people that are making the most money or the businesses are the ones just like doing the worst behavior. Like something seems like fundamentally broken. And then I know Bitcoiners say, fix the money, fix the world. Maybe that's right. But like, that just seems fundamentally just wrong.
Yeah. I agree. I think it's just like a structural thing with the way media and information works. It's like you're going to sell to the highest bidder. So the only way around this is say, I'm not selling to the highest bidder. I'm not trying to maximize my revenue as a creator. I'm going to do what I'm going to do, and I'm going to choose, because I love athletic greens.
Yeah. One moment. Nostr News, brought to you by Solana.
But I think people sometimes do choose advertisers that they actually appreciate the products. But like, I don't know, that's a pretty privileged position to be big enough that you don't have to optimize revenue, right?
Again, and I'm not trying to like hate on the people. I get it. Like, if you're a content creator that really just wants to make your thing, like this is a way to pay the bills. I get it.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, how fucked is it that that's the structural setup where like you have to shill something? Like, it's not realistic for a normal person that makes great whatever they're making to be able to like pay their rent.
And so Zappvertising is...
exactly. Let's go to the positive thing.
It's kind of an answer to that, right? It's like an alternative. And I think what's interesting about it, the thing that I sort of love the idea of the value for value stuff and like help people transact and get paid for creating stuff that other people like. But the thing that I find super interesting about it is because all the clients are decentralized and every client can build whatever features they want, they can actually surface Zaps in whatever way they want.
That's right.
Which means even at like a really big scale, if there are lots of clients and lots of consumption experiences, there's no like core way to insert yourself as a zapper. So you can't like run the metrics and just optimize page views, impressions, conversions, whatever.
Right.
It's kind of like, I think it makes it hard to build an optimized system. Like when you go to like, Facebook or Google, you can just, pay and run the conversions and do the thing. But if you're like, well, some of these audiences are on client X and some of them are on client Y and others are on client Z, and we don't know how they're going to choose to render our kind of Zap ad.
Totally, which is why I'm not sure this is the right answer. And I also have some other like...
Oh, no, but I'm saying I think...
You think this is?
Well, I think something like this, I think there's a lot of good themes that this addresses.
Yeah.
What I'm saying, the positive here is that it doesn't let you do things at scale because you can't reliably know that if you were to run a Zap ad, that it will show up in any reliable way. So it kind of like breaks the scalability of an advertiser, which means the only people who probably would be paying for these are people who actually enjoy the content and want to pay the creator.
Oh, interesting. Okay, I get your point. Yeah, so I could say a couple of ways this is going. So for people who haven't read the article, one of the ideas is that, think of it as like almost like a billboard space. Like let's say, and the reason I was saying this may not work as well as the article is suggesting is because different clients may render the Zap differently, right? So maybe you're like, oh, I have 100 million followers across these platforms. And like maybe on Damus, I can Zap and become the top comment, but maybe Primal doesn't show it that way. And like, there's no Zap shown. So like, that's one of the challenges to overcome, which I'm not saying it can't be overcome, but that was one of the places my head went. But the idea is like, hey, I'm doing a live stream and I'm going to show the top 3 comments or the only the top comment there, and that's it. And the only like metric I'm using is how much you pay, and maybe there's like some like also like it's not illegal or something,
Right?
And so basically it's like a real time auction for that eyeball space,
right? Yeah, I mean, I think maybe my optimism on this model is that it pushes things to happen at smaller scale, and it sort of may limit the ability for traditional advertisers to operate at kind of the mega scale that they do today. It doesn't fix all problems necessarily. Like, I think there's still little optimization games people can play.
Totally.
But
it's an interesting idea to explore. I mean, I think there's other interesting ideas that Lightning and Nostr will open up. This is not my favorite either, but it's interesting. You know, Fountain will do the listen, like they'll pay you to listen.
Right.
That's interesting because that's like, you know, this, what is he calling this Footster guy? Zapvertising? Zapvertising.
Yeah.
You know, it's still kind of like an eyeballs game, which is interesting. And like, at least you're getting someone that's really paying for the value. It's open market. Anyone can do it. The Fountain thing is interesting, like pay you to listen, because then it's not an eyeball game. It's like, oh, like, you know, they took the action you wanted them to take, which is listening.
Yep.
I don't know. Somehow I still kind of like hope that there'll be something, I don't know, that's still not just like sell your billboard, but I get it. And I think it's a step in the right direction for sure from what we have now.
Yep. Cool. Well, it's early, but interesting that people are thinking about stuff like this.
And clearly whoever wrote this Walker, I mean, he's someone that understands public psyche very well. So I think it's promising that he's pushing this direction.
Yep. Cool. Nostr Wallet Connect from Vitor.
Yeah, I just thought this was really exciting. So we may have mentioned this in the last podcast, but Nostr Wallet Connect is an open source piece of software that Albie shipped. And the idea is that you can hook up a mobile client with any Lightning wallet. I think it maybe needs to be WebLN enabled. Obviously, Albie's the use case they're doing it for, but you could do it with any wallet. And so the idea is that if you're using it, for example, if you're using Albie to log into a web client today and you log in with your Albie extension and you already have your wallet there, you can do one-click zapping, super easy. If you're doing it from a mobile app like Damus or Amethyst, then it's a pain in the ass because you have to like select the wallet every time. It's just a non-starter for a lot of people. But what this says is, and what he just shipped is, he took the open source code, integrated it into Amethyst, which is like the big Android client. And I think, I haven't played it with it yet because I don't have the Android, but you can basically like scan a QR code with whatever wallet you want, or, you know, maybe do it's one dialog box, because I know we love those. And you just connect your Android app, your Amethyst app, with your Lightning wallet, and all Zaps just come from there automatically.
Nice. And so just simplify the ability to pay and kind of make it more
seamless,
seamless, frictionless payments.
I think it's a big deal.
And we're not there with iOS yet, but
not yet, but maybe Damus or whoever will do it next.
And
I thought this was also cool, just to show this, is that, you know, you could do it custodially with a wallet. I'm assuming any of the WebLN wallets, Albie's custodial, Breeze, probably Moon, but you can also do it now via the Albie app in the App Store for Umbrel with your own personal node. So I think that's really cool as well.
So you run your own Lightning node
on your Umbrel or whatever.
On your Umbrel, and then you connect with Nostr Wallet Connect, and you point it to yours, and it just debits directly or initiates sends directly.
Which is badass. Like, you're being your own bank and your own payment provider or whatever.
Right.
It's pretty cool.
Cool. I know you're a little short on time. Do you want to?
Yeah, we can do maybe just one or two more. Or,
do you have one in mind in particular?
Let's skip that one. I don't
this
remember what
one
that is.
Derek Ross saying "Holy shit."
Yeah, I just think basically like this was a little unrelated to Nostr directly, and I guess back to back Derek Ross. Fees are exploding right now. I think on the Bitcoin blockchain, and it's interesting. In the long run, I love it because, you know, more fees, more security forces more people to layer 2. A lot of people are, Bitcoin transactions are expensive, and I get it, pros and cons, but I do think that it's a nice extra push to like, let's move to layer 2 as much as we can. And a lot of that, I guess, is coming from the ordinals and these new things, BRC20 tokens, which whatever. I mean, people are going to do what they want to do, right? I actually thought Danny's quote on his free markets was hilarious, where he's like, look, keeping up with the Kardashians is like objectively dumb, and people watch it. Like,
Right.
People are going to do what they're going to do. So BRC20 basically is just like fungible tokens, not just one-off NFTs, but you could mint. In theory, actually, it's quite interesting because like there's a lot of overlap with the Lightning Labs trying to do with Taro. I don't think we figured out how to do the ordinal stuff in Lightning channels. In fact, I'm not sure that's possible because each one's a UTXO. But at least until it gets too expensive, you could, for example, even like issue stable coins as a BRC20 token. But I think in Taro and Lightning channels is much more scalable. But yeah, it's just you could do DK coin or whatever. And like, here we go again, 2017. Yeah, I get it. But it is interesting just to me to see that, the mempool is getting more expensive again.
Great. So you're not going to be investing in those BRC20s. Right?
Yeah, I'd prefer no shilling on that. Thanks, guys.
All right.
Oh yeah, and then just want to give a shout out, Fetty, which I'm stoked to be an investor from their seed round. Just raised a pretty sizable Series A, and I know you've done a video on Fediment and Fetty, and I think that's really promising, interesting technology to create Bitcoin-backed Chomini Cash. A lot of potential in emerging markets, and yeah, just kudos to those guys. It's part of a broader trend I've been discussing, with some investors and LPs, is that we're finally starting to see the growth rounds hit for lighting companies, and this is just another one.
And who this looks like this was led by Ego Death Capital.
Ego Death they were in the seed, and then I think led this for the A as well, and then a couple of other Bitcoin investors. The most notable thing is that TBD from Block invested as well, which I thought was pretty cool.
Do they have like a venture capital arm, or they're kind of
funny you mention that? Not a like formal Bitcoin dedicated one. They make venture investments, not just in Bitcoin. But I think at least last time we talked about this, they had like Cash App had their own investments. Maybe now they're kind of like rolling them in one. But I don't think they have. And then for example, the Bitcoin Clean Energy Initiative, they've done a couple of investments. So I think they've done investments strategically from different arms. I don't think there's like one VC arm, at least to the best of my knowledge, last time I checked.
Cool. Well, good to see them getting in there with the support for Fetty.
Well, as always, DK, it's like, hey, we're not going to have enough to talk about. And we can go for 2 more hours. Yeah. Pretty consistent.
You got stuff to do, and we've got some parties to go to tonight, and happy hours and stuff.
Fiesta.
So. All right.
Ah, huevo. See you guys later.
See ya. Thanks.